The World Health Organization has listed relationship breakups as one of the causes of depression and anxiety disorders. Relationship breakups can be in many forms. It can be divorce, engagement breakup, or any romantic relationship breakup. Currently in Zambia, we are experiencing a very high rate of suicide cases, and one of the major reasons why people are taking their own lives is because of romantic relationship breakups. And so today, joining me is a relationship expert who is going to take us through the impact of relationship breakups on mental health through her own journey and experience. My name is Rachel Maweza, aka Raweza, your host, and so I'll just allow my guest to introduce herself.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Or should I say Raweza? It's
Either
such a
is all
pleasure.
right.
It's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for the invite. I always tell people that when I look back on the number of nights I cried on over my heartbreak and the depression and what I lost, I didn't know that one day I would be giving people advice on how to heal from broken relationships, on how to have healthy relationships. But here I am today, and I tell people, you know what, I'm a living testimony. And if I have been able to get out of such a painful situation, you can do it too. So, as rightly introduced, I'm a relationship expert. My name is Zoe. I go by Zoe Katukula, and it's such an honor to be here today. Thank you.
All right. So, apart from being a relationship expert, somebody who is watching would want to know who is Zoe, the other side of Zoe.
Okay, so professionally, I'm an accountant. I studied CIMA from ZCAS and completed about over 6 years ago. So I have about 7 years in the finance industry. Currently,
Wow.
I'm working for an organization called Tukuya, which is a car hire and taxi app service. Yeah,
Wow, that's amazing.
thank you.
Good to know who Zoe is. Well, we read your story. I personally read your story and I found it to be very inspirational.
Thank
And
you.
I would just like you to take us back to the time when you were in tertiary. You were in tertiary school up until the time when you were out of school and how you had set goals for yourself and how you're going to live your life. Can you just start from there?
Wow. It's amazing. Every time I go back to my story, I feel like I relive the moment. So, coming out of high school, I was very goal oriented, and everyone would tell you that Zoe is a go getter. So, I had set all these bars for myself, go to school. Initially, I actually wanted to do medicine, but I think I love numbers so much. So, I said, you know what, let me try accounts. And that's why I ended up going. So, I chose to go to ZCAS, and I was there for 5 years, as mentioned. And the truth is, I was doing really well, even in school. But as time went on, you're slowly hitting 23, 24, 25. And everyone is asking you, okay, Zoe, when are you going to get married? You know? And you don't realize how much that question pressures you until you are in the moment. And whenever I was asked, when are you getting married? I'll be like, soon. But really, the truth is, I was more focused on finishing my CIMA, getting a good job, making money. But when you hear about peer pressure being real, it is real.
Yeah.
And when you hear about society pressure being real, it is real. So at some point, I think towards the age of 24, I said, you know what? I set goals for everything else in my life. Let me set a goal to actually get married. And I started to sort of interview different guys that I knew liked me, and eventually I met a guy. We used to go to church together, and we were really good friends for about a year. So I felt, you know what, this man must be the one. Why am I trying to look any further? Now, in all this, so apart from studying accounts at the time, I had just authored 5 books.
Wow.
Okay, so here you are, go-getter, doing CIMA, authored 5 books, going to speak to the youth. I thought I was living the dream.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really thought I was living the dream, and everything was falling into place. The only thing that was left was the cherry on the cake, and that was going to be my man. Okay, so we started dating. We dated for about a year before the pressure to actually want to get married. I started saying, you know what, we can't be dating for 1 year. If we're not going to talk about marriage, where are we going? And so I started mentioning, let's get married, let's get married. And of course, because you're two people that are interested in each other, the next thing should be, okay, let's get married.
Marriage.
And so he is equally agreed, to that sort of pressure. And he came home with his family for that introduction, what we call in our African tradition as bringing mbale.
All right.
Yeah. So they came home, brought mbale, and even when that was being done, the truth is I had a lot of doubts and questions about this relationship. But in that moment, it felt like, you know what, since we've already started on this journey, let's just continue. We can't stop right now.
Oh, yeah.
But even when he was coming home with his family, something kept telling me, Zoe, this is not for you. This is not meant for you. And so as reality started to hit, and it was slowly starting to show that, this relationship was not going to work in terms of toxic behavior such as poor communication. Okay, suddenly your partner is not telling you where they are. Suddenly you're not able to convince the person, okay, let's do this a different way. Suddenly you just want to go your separate ways. So you're wondering, okay, we're about to get married, but how can we be going apart instead of getting together? We're about to enter the longest union.
Yes.
Called marriage. And it started to get to me. I was really affected. I was really depressed. And along the way, the person I was dating at the time started to show certain characteristics that I wasn't comfortable with. Okay, and a lot of alcohol abuse, a lot of drug abuse in that moment. And I thought, you know what? Remember, I said we met in church.
Yes.
So a lot wasn't really sitting well with me in the moment. I didn't want to judge him. And so, the first thing I said was, okay, let's go for counseling. Let's talk to people. Let's see if we can get some help. We tried that, but things were just not working. And so I always tell people, you know what, sometimes a breakup is just a blessing in disguise. You don't realize
just
it.
On that, I spoke to somebody quite elderly.
Okay.
And from the conversation I had with him, I realized people have their own definition of toxic relationships. And according to him, he said, toxic is when somebody is physically abusing you in the relationship. If they slap you, they are beating you, or they are sexually abusing you, then that's a toxic relationship. Other than that, it's not toxic. So according to them, that's their own definition.
Yeah.
So you, as the relationship expert, kindly define for us what toxic is. And somebody may be watching and they don't know whether they are in a toxic relationship or not. They are uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But because of how society or how somebody else defined toxic for them, they are unable to come out and they are not sure what is toxic. Yes, so you can just define for us and share how somebody can know that they are in a toxic relationship.
That's a really good point, Rachel. I would like to define toxic as any unhealthy behavior. Okay, any unhealthy behavior that is affecting your relationship in the now and has potential to affect the long term of your relationship. Now, in today's world, I mean, you mentioned suicides in Zambia increasing.
Yes.
It's not because of someone beat them. Mainly, it's because of the mental.
Absolutely.
Their mental, I'll say, pressure that they are going through individually.
Yes.
That could be a cause of a toxic relationship, and sometimes your partner won't even touch you. I was never physically abused, but we talk now about emotional abuse. We talk now about mental abuse. Someone, and they don't even, maybe they don't intend to do it, but if their behavior is affecting your psychological, your emotional well-being, that will become toxic to you.
Yes.
Because when we talk about toxic, we're going to relate it to poison. Okay, you're drinking it and you're dying slowly from the inside.
Yes.
So if even if someone doesn't touch you, but imagine they don't talk to you. Imagine they just ghost on you. I was on radio and people would just call in and say, my partner just stopped picking up my calls. They just blocked me. How would you feel about that? Exactly. That is a serious toxic relationship because it's just failure to communicate. I always tell people, even if you don't want to be with someone, let them know. It's better for them to deal with the pain of knowing what they have done than them dying from not knowing what they've done at all. you know. So toxic, I believe, I know that maybe the older generation would say it's just physical, you know, and people
Yes.
always say, why is it that our older relationships lasted more than the younger relationships,
Yes.
you know? Because at that time they didn't have the freedom to express even their emotions most of the time, you know, and the definition of what a marriage was is different from what it is today.
Yes.
Those days you go into a marriage, you just want your man to bring food home, you know.
Yes.
Those days your woman just stays at home and takes care of the house. Simple and straightforward. Today things are complicated. Both you and the woman are going out to work. Today you want your man to be emotionally available for you, and men are going to tell you we don't know how to express emotions.
Yes.
And so there's so much that is involved in building a relationship in today's world. It's basically because of we're exposed to so much information, we're exposed to social media. So our culture is slowly being switched because of what we see. And it's something that we cannot run away from and say, no, don't run away from the culture. We have to be able to adapt to what is going on today. Yeah, so.
You mentioned that you went for counseling.
Yes.
That shows that you were willing and wanted this to work.
I did, especially, you know, when you're about to get married. That's why I always tell people, make sure you're sure about the person you want to walk down the aisle with. Because when you decide, okay, I want to get married, it's not, you don't just easily walk out. It has to be, you've tried to sort things out, and then now we can walk out. You don't just say, you know what, I'm done. Especially the fact that he had reached home. You know, he had, my family knew him. So it wasn't something that I could just easily say, I'm done with. By the way, I'm going to get to that part in my story, but I had already created committees for my wedding. You know, so it's no longer about me and him. There are a lot of stakeholders involved in it. Exactly. So I was willing to say, you know what, they say this marriage thing is really important. Let me just not walk out of it. Let's see if we can actually make things work. I was willing to stand by his side and see if he was willing to act equally, put in the effort to make the relationship work.
And how did that go?
Painful. Very painful experience, because you know, you want to be in a relationship with someone. You're asking them, you know what, I need this and this and this from you. They're not willing to give it to you. And so you feel rejected. You feel a lot of rejection because you are putting in a lot for the relationship.
Yes, you're trying to make it work.
And you equally need the effort from your partner. But when they're not putting in the effort, it's devastating.
You feel like your efforts are being frustrated.
Exactly. It's very devastating, and you hear in my story how bad the effects were.
Right. So tell us about the time when you finally decided to call it off.
Okay. So he had come home and everything, like I had mentioned.
Yes.
And we were even planning the wedding. But funny enough, after he even came home, things just got really worse in our relationship. Worse to the point where you're trying to look for this person, you don't know where this person is, you know, and you want to communicate, you can't really get hold of this person. Of course, family, you know, his family would say, no, just be patient, wait until you get married, things are going to change.
Actually, on that one,
Yeah.
You know, we see it in our families, in society, how that they try to encourage somebody who, I'll give an example. Maybe they have a brother, they have a nephew who does not probably behave according to their standard. And then they'll say, get married. Get married. When this person gets married, they'll start behaving as if marriage is what is going to fix that person's behavior. What's your comment on that?
I do not understand where that logic comes from, to be honest. And I don't think it's fair that we should tell our young ladies to think that they can go into a place and change someone's behavior. I always tell people, there's no way you can change an adult. No way. Think about how difficult it is to discipline yourself just to get to where you're going. The sort of times you make a mistake, you think you can go and change someone else? Impossible. It's completely impossible, and it's a lie. Anyone that's out there saying they're going to change, people only change when they want to change themselves. And that could be now, it could be 10 years from now.
Yes.
I literally went for counseling and I heard someone say, I've seen women pray for their husbands for 15 years until they changed. I said, well, good for them. That is not me. You know, and that's what we're telling people out there. I don't believe that God, when God said marriage is good, that's what He meant. I don't believe that.
We are going to pray and the person is going to change.
I don't believe that that's what it is. But a lot of times we walk into these toxic relationships.
Yes.
And we just hope that this person is going to change. It doesn't happen. If it does, it will happen 15 years down the line when this person says they're tired, you know. But ideally, someone must grow in their character, must grow emotionally, must be mature to be able to handle a marriage.
Yes.
That's when you can say, you know what, I'm ready to get married. Outside of that, if you're still struggling with bad habits, try to avoid that institution.
Actually, I heard one man of God say, avoid trying to go into obvious battles.
That is so correct.
Yeah.
That is so correct. You know, the battle is obvious and you still want to pray.
Yes.
You know, I feel for us, a lot of us. I listen to these stories every weekend. I've got a program that I call Safe Saturdays, where I'm talking to people every weekend. I listen to these stories every weekend. And the good thing is that I've been there, so I don't really judge them. But I just ask myself, what is wrong with us? What is wrong with us to think that being in a relationship where you're beating each other is love?
Yeah.
Where has the definition of love gone wrong? Yeah.
And so when, at the time when you had a breakup, an engagement breakup, how did it impact you all around?
So to start with, I got into a very serious depression, okay, to the point where I'm not really functioning as productively as I would. So at the time I was working, I had a job where I was actually poached to go and work as a finance and credit manager at the time. And I had just been, during this whole toxic moment, I had just been sponsored to go to Germany for school. You know, things were really going great. But suddenly, at work, I wasn't performing. Suddenly, I didn't want to go to work. You know, I just wanted to stay home. I just wanted to cry. One day I got to the office and my boss looks at me and says, Zoe, I've noticed, you know, you're going through a lot. I don't think you're going to manage, you know, with work and everything. So I appreciated him. Today, I look back and I say, you know what, I thank God for that man. Because yes, I lost my job, but I really needed that time to heal, you know, to gather myself again. So I did lose my job. Here I am broke again, back at my mom's house. And I stopped going to church in that moment. You know, it's funny. You think you're going to go to church to get the healing, but when every time I was there and I see a couple being called to the front, oh, these guys are about to get married, I would cry. I would cry in the audience and I'd be like, God, what about me? What's going to happen to me? You know, and so I just said, you know what, let me stay away from church. I stayed away from church. I stayed away from social media because even the little things, just seeing other couples happy, that got to me as well. You know, so let's just say I was away from the whole world for about a period of 3 months. Stayed home, cried maybe for the first 1 month. You know, so until one night, I remember I woke up in the middle of the night and I cried. I said, you know what, God, I don't care what anyone is going to say about me. I don't care how I look, but all I'm asking is for you to take away the pain. And I remember waking up that morning and I felt so relieved.
You talked about, in your story, you mentioned ridicule.
Yeah.
Yes, you mentioned ridicule. How did you handle that? Because, you know, society or the environment that we live in have certain expectations of each and everyone, male or female. They have programmed how somebody's life ought to be lived. I'll give an example. You go to school, you complete your tertiary education, you get a job. After you get a job, you need to settle down in marriage. When you settle down in marriage, they'll be asking, when are you going to have children? So people have expectations of you at every stage of life. I actually thought this only applies to females. Actually, even males have that pressure. You are 40, you are 35. Are you okay? They reach a point. They reach a point of asking, "Are you fine? You're not settling. You're not. We are not seeing any. When are we going to dance?" And when things do not go according to how their standards is, they begin to look at you in a certain way,
Yeah.
like there's something wrong. What's your comment on that? I mentioned that because you talked about ridicule from
Yeah.
people around.
Yeah, like you've rightly put, everywhere you go, people are asking you, when are we dancing?
Yes.
You know, when are you getting married? And especially this would come a lot from church, you know. And so it puts a lot of pressure on you, you know, because people have so many expectations
Yes.
of you. So many that it's like you're not allowed to fail. You know, it's not
That's
allowed,
true.
like you're not allowed to make a mistake. And what I would like to tell people, you know, out there is to grow emotionally and mentally, because we are born into a society that already has these expectations.
Yes.
The only way you're going to be able to stand is if you say, okay, you know what, I want to achieve this and this, and you are mentally mature and emotionally mature to take the pressure that is going to come, because the fact is it is going to come. So when it does come, don't let all those winds of society destroy you. Decide on what it is you want to have. Be solid about your decision and focus on that. Because unfortunately, I can't say, you know what, it's going to end. It won't end. You know, these are things that have been there for a long time. You just have to be very emotionally mature for what is coming.
Yes.
You know. And so, like you've rightly put, I felt really ridiculed and I felt shamed because at that time, I think I was supposed to get married at the age of 26, 25, 26, somewhere there. And so here I am coming out of an engagement at the age of 26. So I'm going on to 27 and I'm asking myself, okay, no marriage, no children. When am I going to give my mom her grandchildren? When am I going to give my dad his grandchildren? You know, and I always say to people that I'm an only child. You can imagine the sort of pressure I felt. I felt like, you know, I'm letting my dad down. I'm letting my mom down.
How was it like to go back to mom, to go back to dad, to mom, and the committees that were already formed, like you mentioned, and told them to say, okay, the wedding, the preparations have been called off. How was it for you, and how did they how was their response?
For me, it was hard. You know, just the thought of going back to them and saying, you know what, this is not going to work. That was hard. But when I told them, I received so much support. You know, my dad looked at me and said, welcome to the real world. You know? Yeah, so
That was serious?
yeah. So it's like, oh, welcome to the real world. This is just heartbreak number one.
Oh
my
my
dad.
goodness.
But of course, you know, he was just trying to make me feel
Yeah,
better.
yeah.
Yeah, so my mom was equally very supportive. And once I had just made up my mind to say, you know what, because there were a lot of backs and forths. You know, we would break up, I would say, okay, let me try again. We would break up, let me try again. Until finally I said, you know what, I'm done. And I knew I was done when I got up and deleted the committees myself, the committee groups myself. I told them, you know what, we'll communicate with you later what's going to happen, but as of now, there's going to be no wedding.
You
and
know,
I removed every single person from that committee group.
that must have taken so much strength, because so many people, especially ladies, would do anything to have a wedding go through.
I know.
Maybe for the pictures on social media,
Yeah.
maybe to tell people, you know, I have a ring,
Yeah.
I'm married now, but they know to say, okay, they are not even sure about where they are going
Yeah.
and who they are going to spend the rest of their life with.
Yeah.
Somebody said a wedding
Mm-hmm.
is not a solution
Mm-hmm.
to your relationship problems or issues. What's your comment on that?
That is absolutely correct. I agree with them 100%. Behavior doesn't change just because you walk down the aisle. The same person you were before is the same person you're going to be after you get married. The only difference now is you are bound to this person, you know. And so it's crazy that people think that a wedding is going to change your behavior or change. I mean, they always say garbage in, garbage out. The same way it is with the computer, the same way it is with the marriage. If you guys go in as garbage, you're going to get garbage when you get in there. Nothing is going to change. If you guys don't resolve to communicate effectively, if you're not deliberate about building your relationship, no, it's not going to work. You know, there's no one who's going to come into your home and control it for you. No. In fact, from what I've heard, I haven't experienced it yet, but from what I've heard, it even gets worse when you get married. What you see before When you get married, you see times 10.
Amplified.
Amplified. Apparently, that's how it is. And I want to believe so because you're with this person 24/7,
Yes.
365 days a year. So you see all their bad behaviors, and there's no way to run. So definitely it's times 10. Yeah.
So, share with us about the time when you mentioned you prayed. Was it the time when was it the same time when you decided to say, okay, I'm going to walk away?
Yeah. So after I prayed that night and I woke up, I felt so relieved, and I knew that I had been touched, because before that I was so heavy, but I woke up and I was so light after that. And it was that day that I got up and I even went to my mom. I said, you know what, I'm deleting these community groups right now. And not that I wasn't feeling the pain, I was, but I had resolved that I wanted more to life than what I was going through in that moment. So that prayer really gave me the courage to just step up. And not only that, but it gave me hope again. I think what really happened for me was that I lost hope. Lost my man, lost my job. Everything came crashing down. Here you are, you're a youth that's supposed to influence other youth. What are you going to tell them to say, oh, I came out of a failed marriage? And like you rightly put, a failed engagement. Like you rightly put, people don't really tell their stories. I would tell people, you know what, I'm going on radio to share my story, and they will be like, you won't get married. Who's going to marry you after they hear your story? And so there's so much pressure at every angle. But when God just lifts up the burden, you're not ashamed or afraid to tell about what you're going through, because you have hope and believe that, you know what, He has better in store for me. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Personally, I'm impacted by this story, and I would want to hear it over and over again.
Wow.
Thank you so much, Zoe, for sharing. And so, how did you overcome? What are some of the things that you can share with us briefly on how you overcame and to be at a point where you are now?
Yeah. So the first thing for me was to accept. I always tell people, you have to accept the emotions, accept the situation. If it's something you cannot change, accept it. And so me drawing away from the whole world to be alone in that moment, I had to just accept that this had happened to me right now at the age of 26. Accept that you don't have a job. Someone says you have to feel before you can heal. People try to run away from the emotions of the failure. They try to run away from the shame and the ridicule. So you find someone to move from one relationship to the next, just to cover those emotions of pain. But take a time out. Number one, just accept your situation. And then after that, what really helped me was that I started to look back on who I was as Zoe. A lot of times we lose ourselves in relationships, and you attach yourself to someone else, and you start to define yourself by what you were in this relationship. I forgot that I was Zoe the author. I forgot that I was Zoe the go-getter, and I believe that when God has the right partner for you, He won't take you away from your purpose.
No.
And those are the things that I always used to question, like, okay, I'm about to get married, but I'm not doing anything that God has called me to do. Is this the right place for me? So I had to go back, look at my books, say like, oh wow, I did this, and funny enough, one of the books I've written is Battle Against Self. So you're constantly fighting yourself to do better, constantly fighting yourself to be better. So I had to remind myself of who I was, remind myself that I am created for a purpose. And even before any relationship out there, the first thing is the purpose that God has put upon your life. And a lot of times people forget all that. But when you remember that you are created for a purpose, you suddenly start to feel alive again. Like, okay, you know what? I can still do more. I can still go ahead and do more. So it involved accepting, it involved reminding myself that I'm created for a purpose. 3, it involved me taking action. So I was at home for about 3 months, okay, and not doing anything, staying indoors, reading books, praying. So the reason why I always tell people that are out of a breakup to feed themselves with new knowledge is because our lives generally are directed by our thoughts. So when you start to feed on new knowledge, like positive thinking, atomic habits, confidence, all those things that you've lost in the breakup, you start to rebuild because of the new knowledge that you're acquiring. So it was a whole 3 months of intense reading, just staying indoors, sleeping, eating, and I wasn't really bothered about what was going on around because I couldn't see anyone. I
Wow.
couldn't see what's happening on social media. And in that moment, I really didn't feel the pressure. I just wanted to find myself and gather myself again. I just wanted to feel alive again, you know. And after that, finally, after 3 months, I said, you know what? I think I need to start applying for a job. The job
Wow.
is not going to find me.
Mm.
I started, I worked on my CV, and
Yes.
I sent it to family, like, you know, I've done accounts. If you need anyone, just call me. As God would have it, someone immediately called me, like, oh, I've got a client who wants the accounts to be done. That's how I got a first job. It wasn't permanent, it was temporal. After that, someone said, we're looking for an accountant, and eventually I got a job.
Wow.
So at that point, I'm not yet completely healed, but I'm trying to get back on my
Yes.
feet. You know, I'm still broken, I'm still crying on the inside, but at least I'm trying to get back on my
Baby
feet.
steps.
Exactly. Just taking one step at a time. And healing is easier when you've got money, not when you're
I like that.
Yeah, so I needed some money on my side. Yeah. So because, you know, you can't really rely on other people, especially when you're 27. There's a lot of pressure, like, you know what? And for me, because I was so goal-oriented, I would always tell myself, like, how can I eat someone's food for free? You know, it was so, and so I finally got a job and worked there. As I was going there, just trying to take care of myself. Now it's about, okay, what goals are you going to set now?
Yes.
Going to the gym, just trying to feel better, you know, about who I was. And I suddenly went back on social media, and out of that moment, I just started sharing, you know, an inspirational quotes, moments in my life. And someone noticed, like, you know what, Zoe, you're passionate about relationships. I'm like, no, I'm not.
Okay, I'm just sharing.
Yeah, I'm just sharing what I've gone through. And then they said, well, he worked for Radio Phoenix. I worked for Radio Phoenix. We used to have a show on relationships, and it would be good if you came on the show. And I'm like, wow, definitely, I'm coming on the show. So for about a year after, whilst I was working, we had a show on Radio Phoenix called The Chat Room, where I would give out relationship advice. People would call in, I would give out relationship advice, and that's how I knew, at that moment I knew that, you know what, I'm in God's hands. This pain was meant for a purpose. For everyone out there that's going through the same thing. And someone says that God will never waste an experience, He will never waste even a heartbreak. You know, so He used it to speak to the millions of people out there at the time. Then radio, TV programs started, shows started, and I just said, you know what, if this is what I'm supposed to do, I'm going to do it.
Wow.
And that's how we are here today.
Wow. It's so amazing.
Thank you.
So amazing. And so you talked about how it affected your health. And there's somebody out there, they are going through the very same thing that you went through, and they're probably in pain. They feel like giving up. Actually, I've met people who have not recovered from a breakup. Actually, some now are going to the extent of taking their own lives.
Yes, that's true.
So, lastly, Zoe, I'd like you to pour your heart into that person that is speak your heart to them.
Wow. If you are watching this today, I just want you to know that whatever you are going through is for a purpose. Every heartbreak, in the moment we don't see it, but it's there for a purpose, and it's a blessing in disguise. It simply means that God has much greater plans for you. So whatever you go through, whatever you are thinking, just don't give up. If you need any other testimony apart from mine, I don't know what it's going to be, but here I am. I'm a living testimony. Been through heartbreak, been through shame, been through rejection, but I'm still standing here today with a smile on my face, and believe me, I've never been better. So don't give up on yourself. There's so much inside of you that the world still has to see. Don't give up.
Whoa, don't give up. You heard for yourself. Well, thank you so much for making time of your busy schedule to come and pour out your heart, to come and share your heart with the rest of us and the world at large. You're such a blessing.
Rachel,
By the way,
you.
I'm a huge fan.
Wow, I'm so humbled. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I follow you on social media. It's so humbling to have you here. So humbling.
Thank
and
you
we
so
hope
much.
to have you again.
Most definitely. Just as long as you even have my number now, so
Yes.
just call me. I'll definitely show up. Thank you so much for providing a platform.
Thanks once more Well, from me and the rest of the team, it's bye bye.